Hi Ed, what were the most difficult decisions in picking these squads for you and the selectors?
Sure. Yeah, hi everyone. Look, the first thing to say is obviously we're living in unusual times. And I think one of the most important things in this COVID era is that we're really aware as selectors where players are at. Now, particularly that applies to players who are multi-format players for England and also obviously have other commitments in franchise cricket. Those players, in other words, who are spending a lot of their lives inside biosecure bubbles. So leading into this selection meeting, we were all very mindful of checking up on those players, seeing where they were at, what the right thing for them was, as well as, of course, what's the right thing for England. And I think moving forward, I think an understanding and a trusting relationship between selectors and players about when people might need rest or might need breaks from biosecure bubbles is going to be a very important part of selection. So that was probably one of the big focuses going into selection, and obviously contributed to the decision to rest Jofra Archer and Ben Stokes and Sam Curran from the second half of the trip to South Africa, the ODI section.
Did those guys feel like they needed the rest physically or mentally or a bit of both?
Well, I think there are obviously, there are several players who play every format for England. Obviously, Jos Buttler is also in every format for England, and Sam Curran is in every squad. Ben and Jofra pretty much start every game that they're available for. So we're just very mindful of the amount of cricket we've got coming up. So after Christmas, so first of all, there's obviously before Christmas, South Africa T20s and ODIs, what we're talking about today. And after Christmas, we have a very congested schedule, beginning with those 2 test tours to Sri Lanka and India. So I think we're just very mindful that we want Jofra and Ben and Sam and indeed Jos and everyone else to be at their best when they're playing for England. And that will mean taking some opportunities to rest them from some cricket.
And this is going to be a huge thing for selection going forward, isn't it? Because it's going to take its toll mentally on the players, being in a bio bubble, particularly abroad. What else can you do?
Sorry, what do you mean? What else can you do?
Well, what else is obviously you're a selector, but how can you ensure players are staying fresh mentally and that they're okay?
Well, I think the best thing we can do from a selection point of view, and we're trying to do this all the time, is just to have really good communication between selectors and players, and also between selectors and coaches and selectors and support staff, which includes medical and well-being support staff. Just so we have the best possible information about how players are doing, and we're able to make the most informed decisions in conjunction with the player about what's best for them and what's best for England. It's every case is different. Every individual finds the experience of behind closed doors cricket different. And even within the same tournament, the protocols can vary very substantially between one player and another. For example, people are playing at the IPL. Some of the arrangements are very strict in terms of people aren't allowed out of the hotel almost at all, just for a small period of every day. In other franchises, they have much more sort of liberty to live their lives. So I think it's going to be a really important aspect of selection, that we have really good information, very trusting relationships. And the other thing I'd add to that, James, is that we also obviously believe that an expanded pool of players is very important. If we're able to, take some people out for a short period of time who are multi-format players in particular, but not only multi-format players, and able to bring in really good other options, then we hope that England's performances can remain at a very high level. And we can peak for the tournaments that we prioritise. So that's the plan.
And finally, from me, no Joe Root in the T20 squad again. Is the team moving in a different direction now?
I don't think so. I think it's obviously true that Joe Root stays outside that T20 setup for now. It's also the case that we're very aware just how great a cricketer Joe Root is, one of England's greatest ever cricketers. And if there was a major tournament around the corner, as there will be next autumn with the T20 World Cup, we could easily include Joe Root, and we know how good a player he is. It's also the case that currently, as it stands today, he's not in the starting 11 in T20s. And it's also the case that Joe's one of those people who's going to need to have some rest over the next year. Now, this tour, that wasn't an appropriate or necessary problem because they're all going to be together, ODIs and T20 players. But in the new year, if I had to take a guess, I would say that England would be looking, not a guess, if I had to make a prediction, I would say that England will probably use T20s to rest Joe Root in 2021 in the early part of the year. That doesn't mean that he's in any way ruled out or couldn't come in for a major tournament later on in the year. But looking after players like Joe Root, who are so central to England's success, is very important.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. We'll go to Adam Mountford at BBC, please.
Hi, Ed. Obviously, you've got Adil Rashid featuring in both the T20 and the ODI squad. We clearly don't know a lot about exactly what England will be doing in terms of test matches in Sri Lanka, and we don't know everything about India. Have conversations taken place there with you and Adil about potentially playing red ball cricket again for England?
Yes, sure, absolutely. The first thing to say is that Adil's obviously making a very successful comeback from a serious shoulder injury, which kept him out of cricket for the second half of 2019. He wasn't able to play after the World Cup in the domestic summer, as we all know. Adil's doing really well. That shoulder's getting better all the time. At the moment, there is a real question mark about whether Adil feels it's the right thing to do to push that by playing in 4 and 5 day cricket. So I'd say at the moment that doesn't seem likely in the immediate term. However, I think Adil is an exceptional all-round cricketer in all formats, and there might be a time when that's something he feels able to do. Obviously, from a selection point of view, as you all know, we as selectors like to have the most amount of talent to pick from. That's only natural. And obviously everything we've done over the last 2.5 years has been geared around trying to make people available and to have those really super talented players available. But at the moment, I think there is a concern on Adil's part that his excellent recovery from his shoulder injury and his terrific form in white ball cricket, is something he has to balance as he looks to the future.
Any more, Adam?
No, that's fine. I'll let others go.
Okay, no problem. John Norman, then TalkSport, please.
Thanks, Danny. Cheers, Ed. I imagine when you're writing down your squad after you put in the captain's name, Ben Stokes comes in pretty soon after it. Just how welcome is it for you to have him available again for selection?
Yeah, it's what can I add to what people know about Ben Stokes? He is a remarkable cricketer, actually. It was interesting to see Ted Dexter in an interview this week with one of the media outlets said he was in awe of Ben Stokes, and that's coming from one of England's greatest ever batsmen. Ben is an exceptional competitor, a winner, and someone who gives to the team. So obviously it's great to see him back in the T20 setup, and we're able to select from a full complement of players for that T20 squad and also for that T20 11. So it's great to see Ben back in an England shirt.
The fact that Stokes and Archer and Sam Curran have been rested for the ODIs, does this mean that the focus, or one of your many focuses, is very much on the World T20 and making sure that between then and now, England, as much as possible in these COVID times, put on the field the very best team that they can play?
Sure. Look, you're absolutely right that we're further down that T20 cycle. We have these 2 T20 World Cups coming up in autumn 2021 and then another one the following year. So there's that immediacy of the T20s. And, Owen Morgan and actually Joss Butler, the vice captain, have spoken about wanting to play something very close to a best 2020 15 or in the squad, and then playing 11s as much as possible so they can play together within reason. And obviously we'll review that on a constant basis. The ODIs also, we believe it's a very strong 15 there as well. But yes, there's more time to go before we get to the crunch time of the next ODI World Cup. So in the meantime, we want to have England teams succeeding across formats, but we will slightly prioritise one over the other, as you suggest there.
Last one from me. You talk about in your role as head of selection, you have to bear in mind those players that are triple threats. They play all three formats. But of course, the IPL taking place now, and another one scheduled for probably April, May. Can you foresee some of the players mentioned or some of those players that participate in that tournament having to then miss England games when our summer gets back underway, whenever that is, May or June?
Sure. I wouldn't speculate about that at the moment, Jonathan. I think the ECB's position for a number of years now has been to permit players to play in the IPL, and that actually has coincided with England's very good form in white ball cricket and World Cup success, and also now a very strong T20 side. And it's been excellent to see players like Sam Curran do so well at the IPL and to really have those development opportunities. It's obviously going to have to be a case-by-case situation where we as selectors and also players constantly evaluate what's in the player's self-interest and what's also in England's interest, and that we are very sensible about player workloads moving forward. And to me, that's a very important conversation. The ECB's position has been to allow players to play in the IPL. We are going to take opportunities as selectors for England to rest one or two players when we think it's a good opportunity to do so. The second half of this white ball tour is an example. And we'll also look to make sure that England teams are strong all the way across formats at all times, but probably peaking, if possible, for those big tournaments when we need our best players the most.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, John Etheridge and then Will Macpherson, please.
Hi. Just on those three players who've been rested, I mean, kind of following on from what you've just been saying, I suppose. I mean, there will be some people who think it's the wrong way around, where they play in the IPL for quite tasty sums of money, and that's left them too tired to pay for England. How would you respond to that?
Well, I don't think it's a question of too tired. I think it's more nuanced than that, John. And I think this is, it's obviously an important point and naturally something that's worth discussing. But I think if you look at the commitment shown to England by those three players, Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer and Sam Curran, and their big performances in an England shirt, I don't think anyone could question their commitment to the cause. I think it's simply the case that the ECB has had a stance for a number of years of permitting players to play in the IPL. Clearly, multi-format players who also play franchise cricket. So, the players we're talking about, Jos Buttler, Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer, Sam Curran, they are people who are going to need to have some rest. And that's something that we as selectors are very mindful of. And we're going to take those opportunities to give them a break when we believe it's in England's best interests. And that's what we're doing for the second leg of this South Africa tour.
Okay. Could I just ask you about Reese Poppy?
Yeah.
I think he played one game against Ireland in the summer and was sort of, he was in and around the squad a little bit. But now he's back in both squads here. In fact, in the T20 squad, he's ahead of Chris Woakes, for example. So he's had a long and frustrating string of injuries, I suppose. Can you just explain what qualities you see in his bowling, and perhaps talk about a little about his long journey back to full fitness?
Sure. Very good question, and I think that's an important feature of these squads. Reese Poppy is a very talented and difficult opponent. One of the things that everyone in selection is very aware of is just how awkward he is to face. He's got pace, height, skill, movement, and angle of being a left armour. So there's a lot there in his favour. And he's someone who, when he's able to play a string of games together, and he is in good form, I think very quickly we see what he can bring to a white ball team. So we're really pleased that Reese has made such a good return to fitness. Obviously, he's had a lot of injury problems over the years. His form is good. We want to give him some opportunity. We also want to be sensible, and we don't want him to get injured again. So we want to work with him to make sure that he's available all the way through. But yes, he is playing well, and he's someone who I can see making a serious contribution when he's on the field for England.
Hi, Ed. I wanted to ask about Tom Bantam specifically, but a couple of other players who are sort of in a similar position to him. Tom's been named as a reserve in this squad, but he has a deal in another franchise competition with Big Bash. Did you, with players in his position, Liam Livingstone, Lewis Gregory, also kind of fall into that camp? How much were you tempted to just say, go to Australia, play as much Big Bash as you can, rather than, in Tom's case, be a reserve for the England squad? In the other two's case, they're in the ODI squad, but probably aren't certainly guaranteed to play all 3 games. Were you just tempted to say to them all, go and play more cricket rather than carrying?
Well, certainly with the case of Liam Livingstone and Lewis Gregory, who haven't played a huge amount for England, it seemed that they were in the squad, so that would be the best place for them to be in an England squad. And we all know how difficult it is to get into England's white ball squads, which have been so successful under Owen Morgan. So that seemed a natural thing for them to be selected and to be part of that squad. And then with regards to Tom Bantam, that's a good question. I think Tom's a very young player, and I think at this stage it's good for him to be around as much as possible and to take every opportunity to be around the group, to make a case, to get into the white ball side, and obviously challenge in particular for that T20 World Cup around the corner. So with the general point is well made, Will, that there are times when if we feel someone's, very distant from playing, we might sort of, if you say, take the decision to leave them to play other cricket. That's a good observation. In this particular instance, with those 3 you name, we think it's the right thing for them to be with England.
And how does that contrast with Saqib Mahmood maybe, and Matt Parkinson, who's also not in the squad when they've been in recent squads?
Very, very good points. So, and Saqib Mahmood is probably the example of the opposite, where Saqib finished as reserve for both formats against Australia, for the ODIs and the T20s. And yes, if in terms of sort of pecking order, Saqib would be a reserve for this trip to South Africa, and he hasn't slipped below that at all. He's still someone we believe is a very talented and high potential player, and we're excited about his future. We have taken the decision not to take him on the tour as a reserve when he's been a reserve for a long period in the summer. So again, it's a case-by-case basis where we will explore and analyse every player, where they're at, what they need, and the best thing for them and for England. And sometimes there'll be a slight difference for one player than the other. But we have already communicated very clearly with those players.
So you're hoping that Saqib might find himself some cricket instead?
That's one option. That would be welcome, yeah.
Okay, we'll go to Joe Harmon and then Dean Wilson, please.
Hi, Ed. Joe Denley's obviously missed out on both squads there, having been part of them recently. Could you give a bit of detail on why that's the case? And given his age, do you see a route back in for him?
Sure. Good question, and another very relevant point. Joe Denley, is a trusted England player, and actually he's been around Owen Morgan's side now for a long time. And he could easily come back for a big tournament or down the line. Probably I'd say his status is a little bit similar to Liam Dawson's. Liam's injured at the moment, but those 2 players are people who people know a lot about. They're highly regarded inside English cricket, and they could always come into a squad for a big tournament or return to the team at any point. But yes, Joe has missed out on those 2 squads. Notably, there's a change of status from him from the T20s, because he played in the last T20 this summer and was in that squad. He isn't in this squad. And then we made the decision not to take him as a reserve, which of course we could have done, but we feel at this stage that wasn't the best thing for him. No doors are closed to Liam Dawson when he's fit again, or to Joe Denley. That's an area that we do need. We do need backup. That sort of spin bowling all-rounder, and indeed, spin full stop. So I would say those 2 are very much in the hunt in the medium term. But for now, yes, Joe misses out on selection for South Africa.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Dean Wilson, and then we'll finish with Lizzie Ammon.
Afternoon, Ed.
Hi.
Thanks for your time. I just wanted to ask about Mark Wood. How close did he come to getting a test contract? And are you at all concerned that there's talk about him becoming a white ball only player, obviously named in both of your white ball squads for this tour. But there's, clearly as a father, as a injury, battler, and so on. Where do you kind of see his status between white and red ball cricket?
Sure, good question again. I think Mark played 3 tests in the last contract cycle. Obviously, he wasn't a test contract player in that cycle. He played very well at times in the tests, and it was great to see him bowling fast and contributing to victories. It's also the case, obviously, that for example, other players who got contracts, did play significant amounts of test cricket in that period. So there are a limited amount of contracts to give out, and Mark didn't get a test contract in this instance. I think down the line, if Mark's able to be available from a fitness point of view and to be bowling at his best in really good form, I think a test contract is absolutely within his grasp. And obviously that's something we hope he aims for. We believe he could be a key player in all formats. And again, we're very conscious of Mark's workloads, and we spend a lot of time thinking about, not over bowling Mark, making sure that he's at his best when we need him most. Down the line, he could easily be awarded a test contract. In terms of his own position, how he thinks about the future and how he balances opportunity and possibilities, that's up to him. We work with him. We'll try and get the best out of him. We'll try and keep him fit. The medical team put a huge amount of work into Mark, as they should, because he's a very trusted and important part of the England setup. But really, sometimes players have to work out what they want to do with their own careers.
I mean, he's been quite clear that he wants to go to the IPL in the spring. There's clear advantage associated with that, with the T20 World Cup in India, but that's also going to be an extra workload potentially on him that you're not going to be able to manage, and therefore you may well have to leave him out of England games in order for him to be ready for the things that you want him to be ready for, such as the Ashes next winter.
Well, there's a lot of hypotheticals in that question, and we just don't know what's going to happen with Mark Wood's IPL career and what workload that ends up looking like. Traditionally, he hasn't had a taxing IPL workload when he has been out there, so we'll have to see what happens there. We'll be watching it very closely. We'll be working really closely with Mark. And I know the medical team, he's someone who they pour a lot of energy and support into. So I'm sure that will continue. And also we as selectors will be watching that very carefully and doing everything we can as one of our contracted players. Mark is one of our contracted players. The contract he has is for white ball cricket, but he's a contracted player for England. And we'll be doing everything we can to help him to be at his very best when we need him.
And just a final one from me. Are you kind of confident that going forward, that the bubble life in England and perhaps elsewhere will not be as onerous as it was this summer, and that there'll be opportunities for players to kind of come and go a little bit more frequently, so that you perhaps don't have to rest guys from so many series, that they can actually get those sort of mental downtimes a bit more easily?
Dean, look, again, it's a really important issue, but it would just be wrong for me to speculate about what COVID is going to look like in a few months' time. The truth is, we don't know. And we want the players to have an environment where they're healthy and where it's sustainable on every level. But we just don't know what COVID protocols are going to be like in the future. It's obviously a very fast-moving situation at the moment. And the only thing I'd say, and probably I perhaps should have said this at the very beginning, is that I think we need to almost reconsider how we frame the concept of rest. What we're really thinking about here is not necessarily only the question of time in cricket and time out of cricket, but also what the circumstances of a player's life are when they're playing. And I mentioned at the beginning that COVID protocols, which determine how a player can live his life, vary enormously, not only between competitions and between tours, but also within competitions. So really what we're looking at is we're trying to work out how draining and how debilitating the circumstances are for that individual player. Is his family able to be with him if he's got kids and a family life? If so, is that environment actually maybe quite healthy and helping for his immediate cricketing challenges? And it's just that awareness of whether players are feeling really depleted by the experience they're having, or whether in some cases they're actually feeling, very comfortable and they're traveling well. I think they're the kinds of conversations which are going to be very important in terms of England's performance, and those trusting relationships between players and management, players and selectors, and also the well-being of medics, so that we're able to make the most informed decisions. In terms of what cricket's going to be like in England next summer, I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that we as a selection group, myself, James Taylor and Chris Silverwood, we want to do everything we can to know the most amount about how players are and to do the best thing for them and for England cricket. And that's going to be a big part of our job in this next cycle.
Has any player actually said to you that they've enjoyed bubble life more than non-bubble life?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that some players, and this probably extends beyond COVID cricket, but there are times when clearly, if circumstances are good, it can be a good place to be. If you're with your family and it's working well and you've got enough time and, the cricket is working well, that can be a very good place to be. It's just, we've got to look at every player on a case-by-case situation and make those judgments. This is not an area where you can have, scientific proof. You've got to make judgments based on an informed view of the player and what they're going through. And we want to get that absolutely right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Last question, Lizzie, please.
Hi, Ed.
Hi, Lizzie.
When you and the panel are meeting, but you, as I assume, have one eye on what else is coming up in the future. And as things stand, the World Test Championship is live, and England have a good chance of competing to get into that final. I guess that's also in your mind when you're picking squads, that there is potentially a pretty hefty start of 2021. How do you balance up the priority of a World T20 in a year versus a World Test Championship?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And that's going to be one of the big challenges for us as a selection group. So, for example, someone like Ben Stokes, obviously we'd like him to be available and in a good place to be in that test team in Sri Lanka. So it felt like the right thing to do to rest him from the second half of the South African tour coming up. And they're the kinds of calculations that we're going to be making more and more. I think they are two very big priorities. Test cricket in general, the Test Championship if it goes ahead, and also obviously we're heading into an Ashes year. And then on the other hand, there's that dual peak of T20 World Cup. And I think there will be one of the key things we will be working on is making sure that the players that are in, the starting 11s of both those teams at the moment, Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer, Joss Buttler, with Sam Curran also in squads all the time as well. We want to make sure that we are getting the balance right, getting enough rest, but also making sure that the teams have good form and confidence as they build towards those major events.
And just very quickly, in terms of looking ahead to Sri Lanka, are you hoping that there'll be an opportunity for some red ball training camp or something prior to that?
Again, look, at the moment, all those things are up in the air. For the moment, we've just, we're focusing on the South Africa white ball cricket and the Sri Lanka test tour. There have been plans for camps and so on. The status of those things is unclear at the moment with everything that's going on with COVID and beyond. So we may have to, make sure that our players are really well prepped, even without having everything that we want. But we have a very good team, coaching and also support staff, and as well as a highly motivated player group. And we'll do everything we can to be ready for every England tour.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Ed. That interview can now go live. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.